Without waste of time, I'd like to give over to Dr. Sello. Dr. Sello, welcome to our studio.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. The time is yours. Thank you.
Good evening, farmers. Good evening, everyone that has made time to join us. I'm going to try and put the slides on the screen so that we can hit the road right away. If I can just get a thumbs up, if someone can confirm when you can start seeing my slides on the screen. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. My name is Sello Maboe, as Khomotso has already mentioned. We would like to take this opportunity also to thank all the people that have taken the time to be with us this evening. You'll see the invitation said livestock webinar, pregnant cow and biosecurity, but I thought I would rearrange things a bit and we'll talk about it as we actually go along. Just a few housekeeping rules. We want to be 100% sure that everyone is aware the session is being recorded. And we also would like to leave questions to the end of the session. But you are more than welcome to post any questions in the chat box. And please, if you can keep yourself muted as well as keeping the video off, just to make sure that we don't strain the bandwidth as well. At the end of the day, we also rely quite heavily on your feedback, and we would really like to hear from you, gentlemen and ladies, for future topics that you really would like us to consider going forward. We chose the specific topics today based on popular demand. I had a couple of farmers asking me on WhatsApp groups, and we decided to actually combine the two of them for today. And hopefully by the time we get to the end of the session, we'll have done justice to the two topics. So you will see the reason why I chose to actually put foot and mouth at the top. I don't think at this stage in South Africa there's any debate as to why we want to give as much airtime as possible to foot and mouth disease. And we will get down to the details later on. And hopefully, in fact, okay, the second part of this session will be looking after the pregnant cow, but more specifically to that period very close to calving, because we know this time of the year in summer breeding areas, it's also calving time and help is not always available. So where farmers are in a position to help themselves, we want to try and share as many tips as possible to make your life easier on the farm as well. We're not going to be spending a lot of time on all these questions, but I'm hoping that by the time we are done this evening, we will have answered majority of these questions. To some people, some of them might be nothing new, but I want us to actually zoom into what is it that we can do as farmers or as stakeholders on the ground, other than just focusing on the academic side of what the disease is. We want to focus a lot more on what is practical, what can be done on the ground, like I said. Key things that I want to cover, the 5WH and 5W and the 2 H's, that answers what is it that we're dealing with. It's a viral disease of cloven-hoofed animals, which means cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, as well as some wild animals that are cloven-hoofed. And why the whole fuss about the disease? It's a highly contagious disease, meaning that if it actually enters your herd, it tends to spread very quickly. If it enters an area, depending on the different serotypes that are involved in a specific outbreak. but it's a disease that gets everyone highly concerned because it's highly infectious. And we also call it a disease of very low mortality. So these animals will get those lesions in the mouth and in the feet. And a lot of them, in fact, by week 2, week 3, they will have healed and there'll be no a trace of the disease on them other than scars that you can sometimes find in the oral cavity. And the risk with those animals is they could potentially still be shedding the virus and spreading others without really raising an alarm. Other hosts that I've actually added here includes reservoir hosts. One of the reasons why a disease like foot and mouth is a disease that we've managed to live with for many years, because part of our ecosystem includes the reservoir hosts for the virus. And the reservoir hosts, basically, we're referring to the buffalo, which are animals in a specific, or the buffalo in a specific area of the country where the disease is known to occur. They do not get clinically sick of the disease, but unfortunately, it spills over to cattle and other susceptible animals, mostly by contact. And we will touch also on when exactly we can expect the high risk period to be as well. I mean, one of the things when I work in known foot and mouth areas that we've noticed is in winter, when cattle in communal areas run out of food, they tend to actually wander and go longer distances than they normally would. And in a lot of areas, they would come into contact with buffaloes, either at the fence line or whether the buffaloes have broken fences in those endemic zones of the country. And when these animals come back home after rains and they no longer have to graze far, a lot of them would come back infected as well. And of course, there is also the human element where, in as far as animal movement is concerned, like I said, it spreads by contact, whether be it directly through infected animals, having contact with susceptible animals, but even human beings can actually help spread the disease. And that is why when we go to control areas where there's roadblocks, you always find these animal health professionals in their full gear, especially the PPE. Why is it important? Obviously, number one is the animal welfare aspect. Only healthy animals are actually happy to produce healthy, safe food. We don't want animals that are sick. It's not in any animal's interest or welfare to keep them sick. So we do not want them to get sick. But this is also a very trade-sensitive disease, meaning that it has an economic impact. For example, if we exporting 10% of our beef and we get a disease outbreak like foot and mouth, and our trade partners are no longer taking our meat, this is meat that goes back into the market, which has an impact on meat prices. In fact, as far back in the value chain as the winner prices, because then there's an oversupply and then the downward pressure on the prices as well. And that's where the farmers actually begin to feel it as well. In fact, all the economies that rely on livestock production, and majority of whom unfortunately reside on the African continent. And then we will also talk at some later stage also on how to minimize the risk, especially now that we approaching Christmas and everyone is going home. People will be happy with bonuses. They will have money to buy animals. And those that want to get married and pay lobola, this would be an ideal time when everyone is on holiday and coming home to celebrate. But this is also a challenge that we face, the reality that we have to live with. We don't want to come back in January and wish we had spoken to farmers about the risk of moving animals, especially at the time when we are excited and we have the cash to move the animals around. We need to keep that in mind. One of the outbreaks that was picked up was actually in January, after all the excitement, all the December excitement, and including animals that were used for lobola payments as well in some of the areas. So I hope I'm not raising too much an alarm, but if one looks at the question of why, how did we arrive where we are? The last technical report on the foot and mouth disease in South Africa showed that as things stand at the moment, only 3 of the 9 provinces in South Africa managed to keep the disease out of the provinces. And the question is, for so many years, we've managed to keep the disease in the traditional control zones there, and we've never had any problem. So the question is, what has actually changed? What is the common denominator with all the outbreaks that we've been seeing? And it brings us to only one answer, and that answer is actually animal movement. You will see here, I show a picture on the left of a truck that can easily carry 100 calves. But I sometimes feel better in terms of biosecurity on some of these facilities that these big trucks deliver to. And then if you look at the top right, I took this picture in one of the provinces, and in this, just along the road there, I could count at least between 15 and 30 trailers carrying 2-3 animals each. And that's where you see the recipe for disaster if the biosecurity regulations are not being observed. And the reason I put actually a tow bar in the middle of the slide here is to also remind ourselves where we actually come from. If we look back many years ago when there were not even cars, whenever there was a disease outbreak, it was so much easier to curb movement because most of animals would be headed on foot. But today, because of a nice little gadget like a tow bar, we can have a disease in one province and in 5 different provinces the next morning. Because guess what? We also have lights on the vehicles, meaning that we can transport animals even overnight. So at a time like this, that's where we also try to encourage farmers, where at all possible, if it is possible, to rather postpone your animal movements to a time maybe in the new year when everyone is back on duty, people that are managing the animal traffic on the roads are all back. Try by all means not to move animals at a time like this. Yes, we know that animals have to be transported for slaughter. If we slaughter animals, it's a different case altogether. But if it's animals that you're going to keep for breeding purposes, especially if you do not even have the opportunity to can quarantine these animals, rather postpone movement of animals until the new year when the controls resources in terms of human resources are actually back on duty. So if it's very tempting out there, rather unscrew your tow bar or turn it upside down so you don't actually get tempted to move anything. Rather settle back and enjoy your festive season, farmers. And of course, we also know that not all animal movement is controlled. There's uncontrolled movement, which includes also stock theft. We know that this is the time when the stock theft increases, or the thieves get very creative and they have a market and they move around a lot. Even in a case like that, we should try and by all means to make sure that we improve security around the animals, because if you can actually heighten the security around your animals, you minimize the risk of them ending up somewhere for a couple of days and suddenly have to come back to join the rest of the herd when they actually get found. So this is probably an indirect way of saying also, let's try and tighten security around our homesteads where animals are being kept. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but a disease like foot and mouth, or it can be applicable to any other disease, we rely on finding the disease, whether be it farmers noticing something funny with their animals, or with surveillance, be it active or passive surveillance in the field. And once the disease is found, it has to be contained. That is why you see roadblocks all over the place in hotspot areas, because the reason for that is we need to try and prevent the spread, because you cannot even start talking eradication and elimination of the disease if animals are still moving willy-nilly everywhere. I mean, you can think about it. If it's a fire that is burning in all directions, chances are you're not going to succeed even if you have the best firefighting team on the ground. And this is where everybody, including farmers, need to actually play a very active role in helping everyone. And like I said when I started, it's a disease of huge economic importance. A lot of farmers at least know about foot and mouth, but the daily challenge we face is to try and narrow the knowledge and awareness gaps as much as possible. For as long as we still have farmers asking us for a foot and mouth vaccine, then it means we actually haven't reached everyone in as far as communicating and conveying the messages, the correct or accurate messages in as far as foot and mouth control is concerned. So amongst the control measures, at least the ones that we rely on farmers to have control over, that is movement that I started with. Let us try by all means to minimize the movement of animals. And like I said, when I started, if you are able to quarantine these animals, if in the unlikely event that, or in the event that the movement is inevitable, and it's not animals that are destined for slaughter, try and quarantine them up to a month and see, and this is not going to benefit you only with regard to foot and mouth, but it actually makes a lot of sense with many other diseases as well. So movement control in as far as foot and mouth is concerned, it's actually quite key in trying to help control the disease. It's not brought in to frustrate farmers and trying to tell you what to do and what not to do. And then, like I said, movement control is actually one of the best ways to win with these diseases. And probably there's no better time to communicate this and get the understanding when we do not have crisis. Because if we're going to be setting up roadblocks and upsetting farmers on a disease that they've never even heard of, or they don't even understand why we're trying to do what we're doing, then we're going to have actually a steeper mountain to climb in as far as capturing understanding is concerned. And like I mentioned, vaccination is managed purely by the state, and there's a lot of reasons that I may not go into for tonight, that the disease or the vaccine against the disease is kept strictly controlled by the state. And there's also controlled slaughter. The state will sit with epidemiologists and do all the risk analyses and decide when to actually slaughter the animals. And especially in controlled environments where the risk of the disease spreading outside the premises is minimal, they would go into a controlled slaughter and the meat treated in a specific way. Many years ago in the past, one of the easiest ways used to be stamping out. If you want to stamp out a disease, you remove all susceptible hosts in a specific area, and you don't have to even bother about anything else, because the virus needs those animals to survive and replicate and unfortunately spread to other healthy animals as well. So if we can actually understand as role players where we actually fit in as far as movement control is concerned. One of the things that are sometimes actually a bit hard to swallow is the fact that you don't have to have FMD on your own property or in your own animals to feel the impact, because it hits on a regional basis, it hits the country, and the demand for our products go down, and then we end up with an oversupply of calves. So or not the oversupply of cows, but the oversupply of in fact, red meat and red meat products. So one can easily even call it a technical barrier to trade, because if it suits your trade partners to use a disease like this against you, it's still part of the fair trade for the same reason that you wouldn't want to import it from them. But one very key aspect that I would like to leave participants in this meeting with for tonight is the fact that biosecurity is everyone's responsibility. We beg farmers, you are eyes and ears on the ground. Don't wait until there's a roadblock to do something. If you see any suspicious looking animal, especially sick animals, the disease is very self-descriptive. We call it foot and mouth because of the lesions in the foot, in the feet, as well as in the oral cavity of these animals. I'm not going to have time to show you pictures, but a lot of them are available all over the internet. And we always say to farmers, where you are uncertain, rather ask, rather err on the side of caution. If you see something that looks very suspicious, rather over-report than under-report. So I'm going to be stepping off the foot and mouth topic. Hopefully I've covered as much as possible on this one with the limited time that we have. And then I also had requests from farmers to talk a little bit about, you know, when English is not your first language, we actually wanted to focus on the cow just before calving, because we know it's the calving season. And I put it out there as a pregnant cow care, but I wanted to actually focus more on the calving management more than anything. The pregnant cow care at some stage, when we revisit our nutrition topics, we're probably going to go a little bit deeper into how we can look after these animals that are carrying our investments, and how we can actually ease them into the next production cycle of their lives as well. So we'll touch on the pre-calving, calving, and immediately post-calving to try and maximize what we can get out of our animals. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with a pregnant cow. And I always say to cattle farmers, there's nothing as painful as waiting 9 months for a calf, and then it arrives and it doesn't breathe, or you get a weak calf that dies a few days later. Then the cow has to go through a recovery period, 3-4 months sometimes, and then maybe even wait for the next breeding season. And then you end up waiting 2 years, and you get those very long intercalving periods that quite often lead to the culling decisions of these animals. And sometimes we even cull animals based on long intercalving periods for extended periods that have nothing to do with the cow, that could have actually been prevented by pure management. Because yes, in the veterinary fraternity, we always associate abortions with some things going wrong in animals, and there's nothing wrong with that. In South African context, when you see abortions, you think contagious abortion immediately. You think brucellosis, you think many other diseases that can cause abortion. But not all abortion actually is related to a disease. So your animal doesn't even have to be infected for you to suffer these kind of losses. And hopefully we will touch on that also by the time we finish this evening as well. So this pregnant cow that we're talking about, that is getting ready to give you a calf. We assume that she's been successfully mated, she's pregnant, she's carrying something for you, and your return investment is your return on investment is winking and almost announcing its arrival. And this animal, we're also assuming that it's in a good nutritional state. It's not an animal that is very weak that might actually battle to even push a calf out on her own. And neither is she over-conditioned, because there's also the negative aspects that go with an animal that is overfed when it comes to the time to deliver a calf. And obviously, we're also making an assumption that the animal is healthy. So in this specific context, we're not talking about a hungry or an unhealthy cow. We're talking a cow that is actually ready to deliver that investment for you. What are those things that we can do for these animals just before they deliver? Never underestimate the importance of protecting them and giving them as much shelter as possible. We know that the past few weeks have been extremely hot, and we get advised to drink a lot of water, to stay under the shade. But if you think about it, these are actually biological beings that get exposed to the same heat, that do not even have the luxury to move into an air-conditioned space. They rely on shelter, and sometimes they even rely on us providing them shelters wherever they are. Unfortunately, if you lock them up in a kraal and keep them there the whole day at temperatures exceeding 40 degrees, at some stage, some of these animals will actually feel the pinch. Especially dark-skinned animals, we know how we feel when we wearing black shirts on a scorching sun. And these animals actually absorb the heat from the sun very easily, and the impact is much more severe in dark-skinned animals. Give them space and time to exercise. These are pregnant mothers. You know, I always try to take it back home how we look after pregnant mothers. We try and be as gentle as possible with them. We even know that when it comes to traveling, certain times when they are closer to giving birth, the airlines will even refuse to transport them, or some of the airlines will say, we want a letter from your doctor, we don't want to take a chance. So if you have a cow on your farm that has the same 9 months pregnancy, why do you want that animal on a trailer being transported on the 8th or 9th month of pregnancy? If we can postpone transportation for as long as possible, rather wait until the animal has calved down, or if there's plans to move animals, rather move them earlier than later. Remember in late pregnancy also that in the last few months, in fact, 75% of the fetal growth actually happens just the few weeks before calving. And as you can imagine, the abdominal cavity, where there's one big bag that we call a rumen, or the stomach, and there's another big bag carrying an individual with bones that is rapidly growing. At some stage, there was going to be a time where the pregnant uterus wins over the fetus in as far as the space occupation is concerned inside the rumen. And these animals can't fill their rumens as much as they normally would, meaning that at any point in time, they are at the risk of a negative energy balance. And that is why when we touch on nutrition, we will also talk a lot about supplementary feeding, because they can no longer put inside that rumen what they normally put when they are not pregnant. There's simply no space. And that's where a nutrient-dense feed actually comes handy in the form of either supplementary injections or even what we can add in the feed. Another thing that I actually want to touch on is the handling of these animals. We know when you've got animals on the farm, we know that during high risk periods like this, you don't want to be having unbranded animals. But if you can actually postpone the branding for as long as possible, because in some cases, if you can think about it, for people that are using the immobilizers, imagine taking that immobilizer with the kind of voltage that it emits. You put it behind the cow into the rectum and you dial your voltage up, and it goes and hits the animal on the spine and the downwards, in the downwards direction. Guess what? It comes across the vulnerable calf there. So the question should be, is there actually alternative means of identifying these animals permanently, other than putting them through branding? Maybe try tattoos as a temporary measure, but try and minimize handling stress. I've seen a lot of these cows, they get so big, they can even hardly walk through a crush pen, let alone even go through a neck clamp, even when it's completely wide open. So let's try and keep that in mind whenever we have anything to do with these pregnant animals. In fact, the list can be very long, but think about any other sources of stress to these animals that can potentially cost you a calf, cost you another 3 months of waiting, another 2 or 3 months of breeding, and another 9 months waiting for a calf that might actually experience the same thing, and you end up with a very, very long intercalving period that is no cow's fault. And then we come to the calving, and hopefully this part is the most important one, because this is the time where I get calls, sometimes even at night, and farmers are very devastated. And unfortunately, when you don't spend a lot of time with your animals or you're working far away, people that look after animals tend to not know when exactly to do what. And then they end up calling you when they've tried everything, and they will start looking for help when no one is actually available. So if we have an opportunity like this, we want to try and say, what does a normal three-stage calving look like? What do you have to look for to say the calving process is actually proceeding well? And when do you have to jump in and do something about it and help this animal? The stage one of calving, or when the calf is preparing to hit the ground, there is an organ or an anatomical structure in a cow called the cervix. It's basically the second door after the vagina that keeps the fetus safe. So this is like your second gate, basically. If that gate is, or if that cervix is still closed, that calf is not ready to come out. Even if you see an animal pushing a lot of times, if you can try and put your hand in there and you can't even go through the cervix, and it feels like you're actually going through a second rectum that is busy pinching around your hand or your arm, you shouldn't even be going that far. That animal is not ready. But before you even get to that, hopefully you will start to see a lot of other body changes. One of the things that I probably could throw out as a disclaimer is there's signs that we see in normal mature cows, and heifers don't always follow the textbook. Sometimes you do get heifers that will calve without a warning, without an udder becoming bigger and showing. But these are the most common things that one has to look for. You will get the relaxation of that area that we call the vaginal area or the vulva, as well as the area between the vulva and the rectum. That whole perineal area, we call it the perineal area, sort of relaxes. There's a hormone that gets released that helps that area to relax and the muscles to relax, so that when the calf comes, nothing tightens up unnecessarily. Quite often, these animals, you'll notice if you're feeding them closely, you'll notice a reduced appetite. They're not very much interested in food. In fact, more than anything, they want privacy. They start displaying what we call a nesting behavior. They're looking just for a quiet space to lie down and be away from all the traffic and all the noise and and all the unnecessary movement of other herd mates. So you will notice this. Quite often you will see something that looks like, we call it a string, but if you can imagine a bull string from animals that are on heat, so there will be this thick gel-like thing, quite often colorless, almost colorless, but it may be cloudy. It starts showing at the back. That's the plug on the cervix coming off, telling you that the calf is actually ready to come. Unfortunately, this process is one of those frustrating ones, this specific stage, because sometimes it can take days. You might see the little bit of the string coming out and you think the animal is ready to calve today, and you find 2 days later there's still no progress. But once that has happened and we've skipped that stage, we move into the second stage where the actual calf is getting delivered. This stage normally can take anything between 2 and 5 hours, depending on a lot of things that we may not actually have time to cover today. But this is the time when the delivery happens. This might be preceded by a water bag. This animal will actually burst that water. Sometimes it's a lot of water that comes out that you're not going to miss. We call it the amniotic fluid. And this is also the time when the calf will start showing, when the animal starts pushing. These animals quite often will also go and lie down. Some of them, they will start seeing some body parts of a calf coming before they even start lying down. And at this stage, you let nature take its course. You are not going to interfere with what nature has intended unless a certain time passes, which we will speak about also further down in this discussion. But if we talk about calving difficulties, they happen at the most in 2% of the animals that are pregnant, sometimes even less, depending on your breeding behaviors and the kind of breeds that you're dealing with. I noticed that we're quickly running out of time. I'm going to try and push this faster. And then the last stage of the calving is where the placenta actually has to be expelled. And the placenta is the afterbirth, or this blanket that the calf wears inside the uterus. If it takes anything more than 12 hours, we actually start worrying. In some animals, they start expelling this placenta literally within minutes to a few hours. It doesn't even get to 8 hours. But anything under 8 hours should be okay. But the moment we go over 12 hours, we're going to have a challenge of a retained placenta, and that's where a treatment intervention becomes necessary. A very important part that I want to touch before we wrap up for this evening is knowing when to actually intervene. It depends on your judgment as a farmer, but when you have a little bit of experience with animals, it makes that judgment also a little bit easier. You need to also know at that stage when to start looking for professional help. So we say, if everything, the calf inside the heifer or even inside the cow, the way it's actually coming out of the birth canal, and you have the 2 front legs with the head between the legs or on top of the legs, it's the normal presentation that we expect. And the calf is facing down with its spine towards the mother's spine, then we assume that everything should actually come through normally, except in cases where there's incompatibilities in terms of the fetus as well as the mother's birth canal. But if we bred the animals at the right time and there are no other complications, a normal birth from a heifer, a healthy one, should actually be completed within an hour. And to make it easy, I put 22 minutes here for healthy cows, but that's what most research has been reporting. We can round this off to half an hour. If an animal is sitting there, lying down, pushing for more than half an hour with no progress, that's where you know you need to do something. Either you put on your protective gear and go in and try and, most importantly, actually to clean, work as cleanly as possible, because the need for sterility inside the animal's body is no different to the need for that sterility inside our own bodies. So you can imagine if you rock up at the doctor and he just wipes his hands with his overalls and he starts operating on you. So we always say try and wash your hands as much as possible and work as cleanly as possible, and then move in and see if there's anything that needs correcting, or if you need to actually someone outside help with these animals as well. I've sent on various WhatsApp groups a video that is on YouTube on exactly what to do when you intervene with calving. If there's people that haven't got it, please just reach out. We will share that video, because I didn't want to take the time here to go through the entire calving process. The video is very nice and short and very, very self-explanatory. Post-calving, or after the calf has been delivered, the most important part is making sure that the mother recovers as quickly as possible and returns to production. And I always say to farmers, the success is not about having pulled a calf out if you need to pull a calf out. A success should actually be when you have a healthy cow that can reconceive in the shortest possible time. So we are not going down the route of pulling animals with tractors and with vehicles, and we end up with paralyzed cows, or cows that are so heavily scarred that the uterus or the womb can't hold a successful pregnancy after this one. And then another one would be obviously looking after the nutritional plan, making sure that for that time when the calf is solely dependent on the mother as the source of nutrition, you know that you're actually feeding two animals with one mouth. And that's where you need to specifically think about what a pregnant cow needs nutritionally, in terms of what it needs to stay alive, to maintain itself, as well as produce enough milk for the calf as well. Just a few key take-home messages before we wrap up. And I always say, when you're going to even intervene with any calving situation, if you have to, if you really, really have to, begin with the end in mind. And for me, the end in mind is the assisted cow that is healthy, that is able to raise a calf and take a bull again. When it comes to pulling calves out of these animals, this is not a time to prove how strong you are. If you get to a stage where you need the pulling power of more than 2 men, you probably need a different kind of intervention. And you'll see on the video that I've put on the WhatsApp groups as well, we quite often talk about all the necessary precautions that we have to take when it comes to putting on the PPE. But one thing that we must never ever forget is the importance to protect your eyes. At least COVID has made available in the market a lot of eye screens that we can tie around our heads. And please protect yourself, especially your eyes, when you're working with these animals, because anything that sprays into your eyes can actually be absorbed very rapidly, and you can still get infected with diseases from animals while you're wearing gloves and everything else and having forgotten to protect your eyes. I want to take this opportunity to thank you, farmers, thank everyone that has taken their time to be with us this evening. Thank you to RMITED also for allowing us to make use of the facilities. We've taken a little bit longer than we had expected, but I hope that we have planted a seed somehow, and thank you so much. I'm going to hand back to Khomotso to wrap up for us as well. Thank you, colleagues.
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor, for having you here in our studio. I hope farmers and stakeholders, you have enjoyed this session. Yes, I can see some clap of hands. That means this session went so well. And if you have any question, this is the time for you to ask any question. From the chat box, the only question that I see is that they're saying, how do I join those? How do I join the WhatsApp group? So you mentioned the WhatsApp group that they can join. How can they join, Doc?
Okay, there's various WhatsApp groups where farmers interact daily and share information. I belong to many of them. Unfortunately, I'm not admin. My number is there. Maybe drop me a WhatsApp, tell me where you are. I can recommend a group that may be closest to you. But it doesn't actually have to be a group that is closest to you, because some of the groups that I'm in actually have farmers from all over the country. So drop me your numbers on WhatsApp and tell me your interest, and I can maybe see where I can link you up with other farmers. I actually feel jealous when I have to sit here and present, because I personally learn nothing when I'm talking, but I enjoy being on a lot of these groups where I just stay in the background and learn from other people that know other things that I don't know.
I hope that has answered your question. Do you have any question? You can switch on the mic and ask. This is the time for you. Okay, any question?
Good evening, Doc.
Good evening, Tebogo.
Yes. I think, Doc, I have two questions. I think on foot and mouth, and as you have said, with the effect that it has on the economy, and not just the economy as well, on farmers from primary until the entire value chain. Apart from the biosecurity that is practiced mostly by most farmers, because with an understanding that in the country, in as much as majority of the farmers might do the right thing, there will always be those that goes out of the rules. What more do you think the state can do in terms of ensuring that biosecurity is adhered to? And I'm saying that because I once delivered some animals from Free State all the way to East London, and I've crossed a province. I've never been stopped even once by the police. So what more do you think the state can, and what intervention are in place at the current moment to ensure that we keep that, to avoid the impact it has on the economy? And as well, I think on cow care, I'm not sure if you can, because then if you can slightly indicate the importance as well of using the correct bull that is suitable for the type of animal that you're introducing to, which has got the potential then of curbing certain things like the dystocia, and you having to and can help the animal in terms of giving birth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Tebogo. Doc?
Tebogo, thank you so much. I'll try and give it my best. My first foot and mouth experience was in 2001 in KZN. And now 20 years later, one thing that I can tell you, nothing beats communication. Education. I believe when farmers actually understand what we are dealing with, it's a lot easier to get cooperation from them. And I always say to farmers that, remember, these are your investments. This economy that we actually operate in the agricultural space, it doesn't belong to government. Government doesn't own cattle. We need to take full responsibility with or without government. Yes, government has the legislative power to do certain things when farmers don't listen. But I think even colleagues in the state can confirm that going the legal route with farmers is the absolute last resort. We expect every animal owner to comply for their own sake, the sake of their neighbors, and the sake of everyone else that stands to be impacted. And like I said, that's why we actually chose proactively to talk about foot and mouth in a period preceding the most likely movement of animals. If tonight's message is going to stop 2 or 3 people from doing it, we've actually stepped in the right direction in as far as minimizing the risk is concerned. If you actually look at the bigger picture, there are other countries that never even have to worry about foot and mouth. How did they get it right? It wasn't government. Farmers did the right thing. They don't have that disease. They don't have many other diseases that are keeping us awake at night. So I would say, Tebogo, it starts with us. It starts with the farmer. It starts with all the stakeholders that are involved in the farming space. And then with regard to your dystochias or your difficulty in calvings, yes, we know that your choice of bull makes the biggest difference in as far as the risk of dystochias are concerned. But that, I believe, could be a topic for another 2 hours, so I don't want to dwell too much into it. The little bit that I know in bull selection that I always tell farmers is when you go shopping for a bull and you have a catalog and you're buying from a reputable breeder, look at comments that they add in the description of every bull. There sometimes will be comments like, this is a good bull to open your heifers. And a lot of times it will be based on experience, on parameters that have been pre-measured. And the most important one for me being the birth weight of the animal. The bull calves that are born heavy are likely to deliver heavy calves. So you do not give them to heifers. It doesn't matter how tiny they look by the time you buy them, because the tiny bulls may look like that because of many other factors that have nothing to do with their genetics. But like I said, in the interest of time, we could speak about this one another hour. There's other nutritional implications or factors that have to be taken into account. The choice of the cow as well. And these things sometimes happen when you've done everything right. It's nature, it works like that.
Okay, no, thank you so much, Doc, for your answer. Hopefully you are happy, and then we can allow someone also to chip in. I'm just going to take the last 2, then we can wrap up the session. Okay, any other question?
Yes, good afternoon, farmers. It's McDonald speaking from Kuruman. I don't know if I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible, McDonald.
Yes. Just want to ask the question to the doc. Let me say firstly, thanks for the session also. And it is a very fruitful and very good session. The question to the doctor is that I just want to know in terms of heifers for breeding purposes, what is the best actually situation whereby should you give a heifers, a bull, at 18 months old, or should you consider the weight in terms of, let me say, 75% of its mature body weight? Then you can give it to the bull. Which one is actually the best way to go for this one? And the last question again is in terms of post calving. Nutritional wise, in terms, if you don't have a good, like for instance, for myself, when I'm in a communal land, what type of nutrition can I put in place for that cow can raise that calf very well? Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, McDonald. This is actually quite a tricky one. There's no straight answer, but I'll give you my personal opinion and also what I've learned from other experienced farmers as well. 18 months is good, assuming that the animal is growing at the rate it's supposed to be growing. But otherwise, age can be very misleading if the animal is underfed and is not growing at the rate it's supposed to be growing. It can also be misleading if there's other anatomical deficiencies in an animal. For example, there's animals that get born with a very narrow pelvic cavity, and it doesn't matter how old they are. You never ever going to correct it any other way if it's an animal that was not actually the best animal to even be breeding with in the first place. There are people that even take it to an advanced stage where they put in what they call pelvimeters in these animals. So they put in an instrument that measures how wide the pelvis is to determine if this is an animal you really want to breed with, or if it's an animal that's even ready to take a bull. So I'm more inclined to go with the maturity of the animal in terms of the body weight. If we have to look at 75% of the mature body weight, that is actually, for me, it feels a lot safer than looking at an animal's age. There's too many things that the animal may also not even have control over, or you may not even have control over as a farmer. You might have an animal on a farm that has access to all the good nutrition under the sun, but if it's not a well-adapted animal for the area, it might be eating well, but not growing the way it's supposed to because it's got other challenges that it has to deal with. And as far as the post-calving care nutritionally is concerned, I always say to also my colleagues at RMITED that specific area, I like to leave it to nutritionists. But where I have to give, where I really have to give an answer, is if you give fresh food. Well, firstly, if you time your calving to happen at the time when there's enough natural grazing, that's the number one. That's the number one choice. But not everyone has the luxury or even the ability to have breeding seasons. So some animals will, for many reasons, calve even at the worst time of the year where you have to actually feed the animals. So I would suggest, if you are able, I mean, these are herbivores, they eat grass. So get them as much roughage as possible, possibly ad lib, or ad lib means make it available all the time for them to decide how much they want to eat. And as far as roughage is concerned, you can buy fresh lucerne. Don't overfeed lucerne. If you remember, there's risks like bloating and things like that. But these are animals that you can also help with concentrates as well. Dairy animals do get concentrates. If you also supplement these animals with leeks, production leeks, there are nutrition companies that formulate specifically for lactating cows. That helps them keep them alive, maintain the body, recover from the calving, as well as produce enough milk. So maybe at some stage, when we do discuss this topic again, we will also touch on how the body of an animal prioritizes available nutrients. So if you deny that animal enough nutrition, it goes into what I call a biological load shedding, where certain lights go off, non-essential appliances, I can call it that, in the form of lactation and reproduction, those will suffer first. So a hungry animal is not going to prioritize producing milk for the calf. Worst case scenario, they will even dry up and they both die with the calf.
Okay. No, thank you so much for the input and also for your answering, Doc. We have a last question that we're going to take for today. It's going to be Tolanang. I hope I pronounce it well. So you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Doc, for that insightful presentation. Yeah, my question is just a very short one. I'm seeing that we are now in the rain season. Some of the crawls will be full with mud. So my question is, how do you distinguish from a foot and mouth lesion, and also from a what do you call
With the rod.
the cows just have a lesion in the crawl because of the mud? So, but my question is that how do you distinguish between the two? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tsolanang. That's a good question. It's very rare in cattle that you will find only feet lesions. So my suggestion would be, if you have very suspicious feet lesions, you probably don't skip checking the oral cavity as well, because when the virus is circulating heavily inside the body, those are the target organs that will show you. But obviously, whoever comes in also to help you with a professional opinion will take that into account. The oral lesions, if some people may have seen what the classical foot and mouth looks like, you're not actually going to miss them. But yes, like I said, when I started, we're dealing with biological beings. Sometimes even the best professionals in the world will miss these animals. But if you suspect something, rather over-report than under-report. If they're not sure if there's borderline cases, they can always collect blood and have the animals tested. And one of the trickiest things with foot and mouth, by the way, is the fact that for sometimes up to a week after the animals get infected, you see nothing. So you get animals that are incubating a disease that are actually time bombs everywhere, and they are actually shedding everywhere they go. And on the other side of things, you actually find animals that have gone through the clinical phase of the disease that heal and do not show anything externally that's suggestive of foot and mouth. So some of the lesions may easily be missed. They have been missed even by very top professionals, experienced people in the field. So it does happen, unfortunately, but a disease like foot and mouth is not going to enter your head and infect only one animal. For as long as there's a couple of animals that are living in close contact, you will see, especially the oral lesions, because it's like ulcers. They're very painful. They produce a lot of saliva, and you'll see these animals will even be reluctant to feed. If you're feeding your animals, these animals are always the ones that are reluctant to move because the feet are sore, but also because the mouth is sore. They don't want to put anything into the mouth.
Okay, I guess Tsulanang, you're being answered. It's very difficult for you to be able to differentiate, as Doctor has said. And then I hope that you got your answer, and you're going to get more experience on being able to identify that.
Yeah, I can maybe just say this in closing as well. With foot and mouth, it also depends on which area of the country you are. If you're in a high risk area, you must not rule it out as a possibility. But if you are in a closed herd and hasn't been any animal movements, and your neighbors are behaving and you can trust them that there hasn't been any unnecessary movement, then chances are it may be unlikely to be foot and mouth. But if there's risky behavior and you are in a very susceptible area or a high risk area, always include the foot and mouth in your list of possibilities.
Okay. No, thank you so much, Doc. I guess if there is any further questions, you have left your email there. Everybody surely they can see, and also your contact details. They can contact you at any time during office hours, right?
Yes, preferably.
Yes, preferably during office hours. And then you're more than welcome also to contact us if there is anything that you want to know. And then maybe Doc is not there, then we can just pass the message to him. And the last message for the day, I guess, in wrapping up, we'd like to say please make sure that we keep your eyes and ears alert to be able to secure your animals in the right place, more especially looking at this festive season, and also take care of your pregnant cows to make sure that you're profitable in this red meat industry. So take care of that ATM of yours. And in closing, we'd like to say thank you so much for all the participants making your time to be available on this free webinar. Keep in touch with us, then we can share more information, and be aware that the session is being recorded, so you can find it on Red Meat Kuluma on YouTube. And even if you have missed other sessions that we have conducted before, just know that RMITED has a vision to empower you with knowledge through knowledge. Has a vision, to empower you with knowledge by bringing stakeholders together, so we can share this insightful knowledge to make sure that you achieve better. So thank you so much. And Doc, is there anything that you want to leave with this session?
No, I just want to say thank you for making time to be with us this evening. And apologies that our session took a little bit longer than we had anticipated. But yeah, thank you so much and have a lovely evening, everyone.
All right. Have a lovely evening. Bye.